Mr. Olympia competitors.
Roelly Winklaar up all the way from Curacao. Roelly actually came on the scene by winning the Amateur Arnold Classic. He's since gone on to win over in Finland. He's won a few different competitions on the road, continually just getting bigger every single year. The one thing that we have to be careful of is losing the definition. And that's what's been his crutch, is that on that stage he's carrying so much muscle, the detail sometimes get lost in that body.
Well, Roelly competed 8 times last year, kept really busy, placed 7th twice here now at the Mr. Olympia. But like you said, this is a guy who, when he's on, he is on.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of margin for error. Some people have described those 2 arms that you're looking at there as 2 of the greatest arms this sport has ever seen. Now, that's, of course, up for debate, but nonetheless, Roelly Winklaar is very dangerous.
Nobody's going to argue about those arms. Those are some cannons that he's carrying there, but we got to look at the detail. And in the back, that's where it really hurts. He's suffering in the lower back, in the thighs, which are very swollen. They just don't have the separation. And again, he's one of those bodybuilders, the more he poses and starts to bring that water out, the better he has a tendency to appear, but he's typically slow out of the gate. At first blush, you can see the enormous amount of muscle, very thick shoulders. Those arms are world class. Those legs are just slabs. His hamstrings are there. But as he gets compared with the other bodybuilders, he can slowly start to get broken down when you start to see the lack of detail that he has by comparison.
By the way, real quick, I want to give a shout out to a lot of our viewers who were from the Florida area, who were going to get on airplanes to come to this event, wanted to watch us but couldn't because of the Hurricane Irma conditions. Our good friend Mel Chance, I know he's at home, he's been checking in, kind of giving us the report. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it here, along with so many other bodybuilding fans. So we're thinking about you guys here in Las Vegas, and now we're going to get a look at Johnny Jackson. Now this is worth mentioning because Johnny Jackson is making, we are told, his final Olympia appearance. One of the great bodybuilders of our era. He's won a whole bunch of titles, as Bob Chicarella mentioned, regarded as one of the strongest bodybuilders to ever live. And we've been debating that for years. But he's bringing a really nice package here in his final Olympia showing.
If he's nothing but consistent, I mean, the knock on Johnny has always been the lack of thigh sweeps, but those legs can squat damn near 800 pounds. It just doesn't translate into the complete leg development. The hamstrings are a little bit slight. The upper body, arguably world class. He's got some of the biggest traps in the business and one of the best side chests that you're gonna see. He retired 2 years ago, and somewhere along the line decided he wanted to come back and compete one more time. He went down and he won a contest to qualify to be here.
I gotta tell you, this is a good Johnny Jackson. There's a lot of thick, dense muscle on that frame. This is not the look of a bodybuilder who's, you know, pushing 50 years old, getting ready to sell off in the sunset. A lot of times you'll see that sort of stringy north-south, up and down look on a bodybuilder as he gets up there in age. Johnny looks really good. He's having a very respectable showing here in what will be his final showing here on an Olympia stage.
And fitting. I mean, he won the USA overall title to turn pro. And this is a guy that he's traveled the globe. He's been all over the place, from Africa to Germany, done numerous Arnold Classic championships. And again, you don't get here by luck. Johnny Jackson, even with the deficiencies, the calves are slight, the hamstrings are down, the quads don't have the sweep, he's still able to take out bodybuilders at their peak because he comes in just with so much muscle.
Well, he's competing in this Olympia for the 13th time. And you know what? This is not a guy whose career has exactly slipped away. He won a title earlier this year in Toronto.
He did.
So Johnny is not removed from the taste of victory. And I think he's done himself proud here at the 2017 Olympia, his 13th Olympia appearance.
Your next competitor from the United Kingdom, Nathan Asha.
All right, so we're looking at a former British bodybuilding champion, Nathan Asha, competed in just his 2nd Olympia. And this is a guy who really packs a lot of muscle. And he's a guy who really, if he can find the formula, has the ability to beat a lot of guys.
Yeah, he won the Lou Ferrigno Classic this past October, I believe it was, out there in Palm Springs. So to get here, you had to win to get here. He didn't do this on points, took some time off, and he's done some pretty good things. He wanted to add some thickness, and again, his 2nd time out, he's actually better than he was last year, just at first blush. And again, this is a 2-day contest, so what we're looking at right now, typically these guys improve over 24 hours because they've dehydrated a little bit, and then they posed a little bit, got the bugs out, and then tomorrow they come back at their absolute peak. Nathan is very close to his best right now. We'll see where that's going to land him tomorrow, but he's been a very consistent work in progress.
Well, a special shout out to those of you watching us live on the Amazon Prime Video app, which is another very convenient way to experience all things Olympia, and of course a whole arsenal of great content, and we're so thrilled to have the folks at Amazon Sports Nutrition presenting this year's Joe Weider Olympia weekend as we get a look at Nathan Asha, and we're going to see all these guys come down. Now we're going to get Lukas Osladil from the Czech Republic come out. He made his pro debut back in 2012, Shawn Ray, and he actually started as an under 212 bodybuilder.
That's right, and he actually won the Arnold Classic Brazil. Out of nowhere, he came to snatch that title, and that's the one that Kai Green won out there, and of course Brandon Curry's won it, and now he's holding on to that title, which got him here. A little bit out of his depth, I think, on this level, but he's one of the more flexible, one of the nicer looking posers, and he's representing very well for the little bodybuilder.
And he's in shape.
Mm-hmm. That's what he won the Brazil show, is his conditioning. He does get in some pretty good shape. Look at the hamstrings hanging off the glutes there. But he's a little bit light in certain areas in terms of the muscle thickness.
I'd love to know, I mean, he didn't have to weigh in because he's doing the open, but I'd love to know.
Look at the glutes, sorry.
I'd love to know what he weighs. Yeah, there's a lot happening
He's the only one that can do that with those magical glutes back there. And I think he's like a physique fitness type guy because he's very, very flexible.
Damn.
Known for the striations in the glutes. The back needs a little bit more thickness and a little bit meat on the bone because he does look slight by comparison to other bodybuilders.
Hey, that's an impressive shot, Shawn.
Conditioning is there for him. There's no doubt. And that's the thing, some bodybuilders look phenomenal by themselves. But when you get to that comparison call-out round, that's where you start to separate from the pack. And right now, he's representing very well. We'll see how he fares later on in the show.
And just to mention it, the judging now turns over to our head judge, Steve Weinberger, who, along with the panel, will take these folks through their individuals, and then eventually we will see them compared. And Shawn Ray, you've said this many times, any bodybuilder, or most bodybuilders, can look great by themselves. You know, the real test is when they're stood beside each other and put through those comparisons. But Lukas should feel very proud about his preparation, because it looks like he did just about everything he could do with what he has to work with. Sure.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, you can only go so far with what you have. You can't knock the guy. I mean, this is the world's best, the creme de la creme, and he's representing the Czech Republic. I'm not sure who the last guy from the Czech Republic was. It's been many years since we have a Czech bodybuilder on this level of competition, so congratulations to Lukas.
Well, of course, all the anticipation is for Phil Heath, who comes in looking for his 7th title. He made his pro debut back in 2006, and we're already talking about Phil Heath gunning for title number 7, but you're going to have to wait till the end because Phil Heath will be competitor number 18, I believe. So he'll be the final athlete, as is the case in typical Olympia tradition. They bring out the defending champion last, but first we're going to get a look at Lionel Bayecki, a guy who, when he came on the scene, Shawn Ray, his career started with great promise. He won the 2012 Flex Pro. He's had a solid career, won an event in San Marino a year ago, but really hasn't necessarily taken that next step that people have been waiting for.
He had a good sniff. He was up there in Brazil against Kai Green and actually beat Kai Green in several poses. He won the San Marino back in December, was in much better condition. Again, the knock on Lionel Bayecki, he's big, round, and he's full, just has that very thick, we call it elephant skin. He's got to find a way to thin that skin so we can see the details. You can see in the glutes, you can see in the hamstrings and the lower back. He's a little bit watery, a little bit soft by comparison to Lukas, and that's going to hurt him as he gets up there against guys like Phil. The back still has this nice little film of water. That should be gone by, at this stage, it should be gone. But I do know that he planned on competing in the spring, had some health issues, had a bout of pneumonia, I believe it was, and he had to back off his training. So this wasn't a complete, consistent 9-month run up to this show from January. He had to take a little bit of time off, and that hurts him because he was qualified. He wasn't going to back out of this opportunity.
And this is a version of Lionel Bayecki that will struggle in this contest. He's, like you said, he's carrying a layer of water, especially in the lower half, and that's going to make it very difficult to compete with guys named Dexter Jackson and Shawn Rhoden and some of these guys who really have mastered the art of getting their physiques ready to peak at exactly the right time. But nonetheless, France should be very proud of their champion, Lionel Bayeki, who comes back here to the Olympia once again.
France had a few good guys. They had the late Serge Nubret, and of course France's Ben Fado. We can't go without mentioning those guys who both competed on the Olympia stage, and this is the latest Frenchman to come over here and do it once again.
From the USA, Flexitron Shawn, Rhoden.
Nara, well, here is a physique that a lot of people have been waiting to see with great anticipation. He was a runner-up here a year ago. There's been so much anticipation because there's been a lot of rumblings that this is going to be a far more formidable athlete than we even saw here a year ago, as Shawn Rhoden looks to take out the champ. And from the front, Shawn Rhoden is always impressive. Shawn Ray, the question is, what's going to happen when he turns around?
Well, and that's the thing. He's not as impressive from the back. And right now, just at first glance, there's a little bit of water hanging on there. He's got to control that midsection. It's just not as ripped as it was. He looks like he's carrying a little extra bloat. That's what I'm going to call it, because he's known to have one of the smaller waistlines in the industry. But right now, he still looks like he just had some food, and that stomach needs to come down a little bit. The side chest, he's always good in. The slight triceps is what really hurts him. But when he turns around to the back, and this is where this shows won and lost, you think of Lee Haney, you think of Dorian Yates, you think of Ronnie Coleman, and you think of Phil Heath. When you turn around to the rear, you better be ready.
And Shawn Rhoden is a guy who notoriously gets better as the contest goes. So I would caution everyone to kind of hold your judgment and watch how this thing plays out, because these bodies change over the course of the night. There's also that 24-hour period that will wait until the finals on Saturday night. But now we're Shawn Ray, we're getting our first look at the back shots of Shawn Rhoden. That's the one that we knew would have to improve for him to take that next step. So I'll ask you, has it improved?
Well, I mean, not to the degree that Phil Heath is up there with and Dexter Jackson. And again, Shawn says it takes more than just the back, but the lower back especially is a very weak area for Shawn. And again, if he's not razor sharp, and he looks to be a little bit heavier than he was a year ago, and I bet he probably would say that he is, but I don't know that that's going to work in his favor. Again, Dexter could be heavier and Phil could be heavier.
There's improvements back there, Shawn. This might not be a good enough back shot to win an Olympia, but I'd say he's lived up to his promise to make some improvements. And what shouldn't be lost in all of this, and it's easy to forget it, when we talk about Shawn Rhoden, we're talking about a guy who for 5 years in a row has been top 4 at this contest. This guy's trying to put together a Shawn Ray type of streak of being an elite bodybuilder for a long time.
And he took a 7-year break before he came back and won the North Americans to actually turn pro to take care of his ailing father. So he's had a very good run.
The king of the gym, Josh Lenardowitz.
We're getting our first look at Australia's own Josh Lenardowitz, fast becoming one of the most popular bodybuilders on the planet. He is the pride of Australia. He already has 3 pro wins to his credit. He won just about a month ago in Tampa, and then shortly after that, he stumbled on a horrific, tragic situation when a guy he was living with named Dallas McCarver tragically and unexpectedly died almost in his presence. It was an unbelievable thing. Josh discovered Dallas and called 911. The story has been well documented. What Josh has endured over the last month is more than any bodybuilder should have to endure preparing for a contest of this magnitude. And Shawn Ray, it is not only remarkable how good Josh looks, but it's even more extraordinary what he's had to go through to get to this point.
And we do know that the mind is the weakest link when it comes down to this level of preparation. Some guys like Brandon Curry left his family for 3 months to go to Kuwait to train, while this guy was battling to keep his friend alive to no avail. He won the Tampa Pro and was on the highest of highs in early August, and by the time the rubber met the road, he was there at a funeral service. So it's amazing that he's here. He's from Australia, so he's been here ever since he won the Tampa Pro and had to endure a whole lot more than most of these guys.
And I know Josh was dedicating this weekend to Dallas McCarver. And by the way, for those of you guys who aren't up on the story, we're talking about a 26-year-old bodybuilder with incredible promise who tragically had his life end just a few short weeks ago. And it was really a situation that rocked the bodybuilding world. So Josh, we're happy that you could make it to the stage. And of course, our thoughts are with Dallas, his fams and his family and friends who continue to grieve just an awful situation. And it really has cast a cloud over really so much of this weekend because everybody misses Dallas here in Las Vegas.
And Josh is representing Dallas, so kudos to him, and that memory will not be long forgotten. And this guy right here, your reigning Arnold Classic champion, Big Mac, the military man, looks like he lost a bit of his polish from the Arnold Classic. Definitely hit his peak back in March. It doesn't translate here in September. However, the lines are there. We talked about Classic and all that good stuff. This is the guy that could easily win this contest if he nailed his condition here in Las Vegas. But I think he's at a disadvantage because I think what happens is he does everything he can in March and he can't hang on here in September.
But let's see how it plays out as the night progresses. Cedric McMillan has become just a real favorite among the fans.
No doubt.
He came on and he was viewed as a legitimate Olympia, future Mr. Olympia, and I think that moniker still holds true. Cedric has the potential of being great. I don't know if he's going to be good enough tonight to sort of crack through and get to that next level, but if momentum is such a thing, he is the reigning Arnold Classic champion, so he does come in with some real momentum. People saw that playful on-stage presence between he and Arnold Schwarzenegger in Columbus earlier this year. Cedric McMillan always says the right thing. He has a lot of fun up there on that stage, and he seems to really enjoy doing the business of bodybuilding.
He brought Classic back to this level of competition on the open side because he's a big man. He's 6'1", 280 pounds. It's hard to rip it up, and you want to see a guy ripped up on stage.
But I will say this. Cedric McMillan wants to be viewed in that top group as among the world's elite.
He is.
His highest Olympia finishes are 7th and 12th. So a lot of people feel that for him to take that next level, he's got to come here on this stage and he's got to put up.
Right. And it's hard to do when you peak in March. But he looked respectable so far. I can't wait to see him in the comparisons.
Jeff Beckham walking out with some swagger. He, of course, was your overall winner of the 2012 Team Universe. It's not every day that we see a former Team Universe champion here rocking the Olympia stage. How about that?
Not to mention, it's his first time. The guy got here on points. He did the business. To get here on points means you got to compete often and you got to compete a lot, and we all know how hard that is. So we don't expect him to be shredded. He is a taller bodybuilder in the lines of Cedric McMillan. You can clearly see the size differences between him and Cedric, the chest most notably. But this is a guy that said, you know what, I'm qualifying, I'm going. This for him is a dream come true regardless of how he places.
And it's so great that you said that, Shawn, because the Olympia, to some guys, it's not just about being here to win a title. It's about being in the All-Star game, right? I mean, this is where all the greats are. So you want to be on this stage. And for a guy like Jeff, you can be sure as he looks around and he's pumping up backstage and he's a few feet from Phil Heath and he's got Dexter Jackson to his right and Shawn Rhoden to his left. It's an incredible thing, and I'm sure he's taking this thing in, and he and his family are just having a ball.
Yeah, and he said he studied the old school guys. He studied the old posing. He loved Vince Taylor and Flex, and he liked the art of posing as a physique artist. And so he's biting off all those guys. But this sport has taken him to places he never thought imaginable, all the way to Dubai and different countries like Germany and Australia. He did it the hard way. He had to go out there and just keep racking up the points. And for him, he doesn't have to win this to be a winner. If I have to be critical on him, of course, he's run out of a lot of gas. Earlier in the year, he looked considerably sharper. He's respectably sharp, but he could be a little bit darker. A darker tan will help him. And of course, he's one of the more flexible athletes. And when doing that, you see a lot of areas that he's not complete in.
Well, if you were thinking about walking away to get a snack or take a bathroom break, now is not the time, because we're going to get a look at Mamdouh Elssbiay. We call him Big Ramy, and a lot of anticipation surrounding the beast from the East. And Bob Ciccarello brings him out, and they call him Big Ramy for a very obvious reason. He is a massive bodybuilder with extreme proportions, massive quad sweep, insane shoulder to shoulder, and he's got it all. I mean, this is a guy who is just loaded with muscle on top of muscle. The bodybuilding world has been waiting for him to put it together. And Shawn, I'm going to let you break down what appears to be the most well-conditioned Big Ramy we've ever seen.
He showed up here at 305. To see him now at 295, he definitely dropped some water. Came all the way from Dubai. It's a very long trip. Training with the Camel crew out there at the Oxygen gyms under Beta Budai, working with the legendary trainer Chris Cormier. The thighs are world class. They are huge. He wound up getting here. He won the Kuwaiti Pro Championships, and in doing so, He beat Dexter Jackson and Shawn Rhoden. However, he didn't beat them here last year.
All right, now let's break this thing down. This is an impressive Big Ramy. He was 4th here a year ago. I think he's poised to move up the way he's looking. We're going to see how he compares. Criticize this physique for me. Tell me what's wrong with it.
Well, I mean, the glaring weakness is the calves, obviously. He did tear his hamstring a year ago, so I know that he's lightened up on the hamstring work. You got to be afraid to do that again. So I know he moved very cautiously because his quads are so dominant, so powerful, and those hamstrings are a little bit more delicate and fragile. The upper back and the shoulders and the arms, they're all there. You can see that. The lower back still needs a little bit of work, but it's coming.
Is this the best Big Ramy we've seen?
I'm going to reserve that till I see him standing next to the other guys. Right now, I've seen Ramy in person competing in several different competitions. Ramy's a very dangerous bodybuilder. Again, the only person he didn't beat last year was the reigning champion, and that was Heath. He beat everyone else. And of course, Dexter Jackson beat everyone else, and Shawn Rhoden had a little bite at the apple. So this is going to be one of those things where we got to see them standing next to each other. But right now, Ramy is representing, and when I say big, you got to be out there standing next to this guy. He casts a very big shadow.
At the very least, this is the most confident Big Ramy we've ever seen. This is a different stage presence than we saw from the far more timid bodybuilder that graced the stage when he was first coming up. So this is a guy who's starting to feel it. He knows what this process is all about. He's getting some swagger, and quite frankly, he has earned it as he looks to challenge Heath tonight in Las Vegas.
And winning will do that. It will give you confidence that you never thought was there, and you start to get the feedback. Social media, the trainers, he's representing a country. He's got a country on his shoulders that he's bringing over here. The army of Oxygen Gym and the Camel Crew are in his corner.
Gerald Williams.
You're going to see a very different physique here when Gerald Williams
Night and day.
walks out. That's a tough act to follow, but he's your 2017 California Pro Champ. He was also 3rd at our good friend Chad Nichols' Mayhem show earlier this year. It was actually his Olympia debut. So Gerald, welcome to the Olympia stage.
Yeah, team national champion. His arms are really his weakness, his flaw. He looks like an athlete, the very, very tiny waist, but he doesn't have the Olympia arms. And this is a show where you have to have those arms. He's a little bit slight. This contest is way out of his league, but he got here the way that everybody else has to get here, and that's by winning. Now, that being said, this Olympia experience will transpire to his next competition that he goes after for the paycheck. Being an Olympian is not an easy thing to do. He deserves to be here, but he's got a long way to go to actually be considered a threat. But we saw what Johnny Jackson did. He built a career 1 year at a time, and he's competing in his 13th Olympia. This is a young man. He's got a real job. He does a lot of real world stuff, and yet he found a way to qualify, picked the right show, and he's here.
Well, Shawn, I got to tell you, it's a real thrill to be able to do this with you and call the action. You've obviously been on the Olympia stage many, many times, holding the distinction of being a top 5 finisher 12 years in a row. Nobody has ever done that. And it's a real sense of history when we're able to have you along for the ride and the coverage team. You always do a great job. Give us a sense for what this Olympia has become, because it's taken on so many different changes, so many different forms, and you've kind of seen it every step of the way.
It seems a lot more inclusive. I mean, when I was there, the top 10 guys, everybody seemed to have a bite at the apple. Everyone was a superstar. And here you got a nice blend of veterans with Dexter and the fresh meat, like Lionel Bayek and Gerald Williams. These are young guys, Jocelyn Arkowitz. Those are guys we'll be talking about 5 years from now when we're not talking about Dexter Jackson. Speaking of older bodybuilders, the Dominican Dominator, this guy's built a career right here on this bodybuilding stage.
What's amazing is, as we look at Victor Martinez, who, by the way, looks much better than he did when he was here a year ago. We are talking about a guy, let's get some perspective. 10 years ago tonight, this is a guy that a lot of people felt won this contest.
I was here and I agree.
Yeah, a lot of people felt when he showed down with Jay Cutler in 2007 that he could have won that title. Here we are 10 years later, and Victor Martinez is still doing it. He's, of course, a former Arnold Classic champion. He got here by winning earlier this year at that Mayhem Pro that I mentioned earlier. And Victor Martinez has done himself and his fans very proud with this showing.
And a lot has happened in those 10 years. Victor was sitting in a jail cell on immigration issues for almost 7 or 8 months in the midst of all of that. Came out almost a shell of a man and rebuilt his body. Not only that, but he came back and he started winning. I mean, he won the Baltimore Pro Championships. He won the Muscle Mayhem to get here. And so Talk about a guy that's had adversity thrown at him and just shoves it off and keeps coming back. That 2007 defeat to Jay Cutler is a career ender for some people. I know Bertil Fox in '83, he got 5th place. He was never the same. Mike Mincer in Australia, never the same after Arnold. This guy came back.
We try to get to Victor earlier and see if he would give us some kind of sense for how many more years he wants to continue doing this. And, at this point, he's taking it 1 year at a time. But for Victor Martinez, I will tell you this, and I've covered hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of bodybuilders. Victor Martinez has been one of the great stories, one of the great athletes that I've had the privilege of covering throughout the entirety of his 17 years in the pro ranks. Now we're gonna look at a guy who's a bit of a wild card tonight. Brandon Curry is extremely dangerous. He's ventured out there to Oxygen Gym, where he has sort of reshaped his entire approach to training. And he is a guy who has proven that when he gets it together, he has the ability to win any show he enters. He's extremely formidable, and tonight he's looking to take a run at an Olympia top 6 finish.
And this guy's 5'6", 252 pounds. I believe when he turned pro, he had to be somewhere in his low 220s. Going out there to Kuwait has been a very good investment that's paid dividends. He walked into this competition with 2 pro wins in 2017 over New Zealand, and he added the Arnold Classic Australia to his already Arnold Classic Brazil title, and I believe he won over in Canada as well. This is the best Brandon Curry that we've seen on this Olympia stage. Father of 4, married to an IFBB pro bikini competitor, Brandy Lever, and he spends so many hours and months away from home doing this. This investment is paying off for Brandon Curry.
Well, he's on a bit of a winning streak. You know, he's won his last 2 contests, including the Arnold Australia, and you kind of just summed up his whole story. He's become one of the hottest properties in the business. His story is very reminiscent of the Dexter Jackson story from a few years ago when we kind of thought Dexter was done. We thought his best years were behind him, and all of a sudden he kind of revisited his approach, changed some things up. Now he's back, and Brandon Curry has a chance to really threaten for a top spot in this show.
Yeah, his legs were his weak points, and they've actually come up. They haven't caught to the upper body, but they have come up.
I was about to say that Brandon Curry has a chance to be this year's William Bonac. Speaking of William Bonac, last year's, really one of the biggest stories of last year's Olympia. He's now has 6 pro wins to his credit. He was 5th here a year ago, kind of snuck up on everybody, but you can be sure, Shawn Ray, that he isn't sneaking up on anybody this year. He is a known commodity coming into the 2017.
Yeah, the guys are fully aware of William Bonac's got a few pro wins under his belt. Working with Neil Hill, I don't know where he can put any more muscle on his frame. And mind you, Brandon Curry outweighs him by nearly 30 pounds. And this guy, it looks, you can't put another pound on him. I know that he's, I think, 5 pounds heavier than a year ago. And he's very confident. It's going to be interesting to see the comparisons because by himself, there's nothing more that he can put on his frame.
This is a guy that, as we were talking about Dexter Jackson and Shawn Rhoden and Phil Heath, his name didn't always come up. But I was always quick to remind everyone, William Bonac has all the tools to challenge for this title. And I'll be clear about that. He's got the tools to challenge. His body might not be as pretty as Phil Heath. He might not be able to get as hard as Dexter Jackson, but from shoulder to calf, this guy is extremely impressive.
And he's very strong, representing the Netherlands. Williams, the only knock on William, I think he has to get some more thigh separation in those quadriceps. Sometimes he has a tendency to relax the midsection. He's got a very short Kai Greenis midsection. There's not a lot of space between the pecs and the waistline, which makes him look a little bit boxy at times, but he is the official new giant killer as it relates to the Olympia stage. Big arms, ripped pecs, nice traps. Very well represented tonight.
From the USA, Michael Lockett.
All right, Shawn, we're getting a look at Michael Lockett now. This guy has had a very, very busy year. He has competed, and get this, 4 different Arnold Classics this year alone. He won 2 events, one Chicago and Vancouver, and he is now competing here at the Olympia in Las Vegas, where this is a guy who, as he has been coming up, has been celebrated as a very legitimate future threat in this sport. He's got a lot of things going for him.
Well, if he picks the right show. Right now, I think he's got to work on the gyno. He's got a little bit of gyno right there around the nipple, some swelling right there. He's going to have to get that surgically repaired. A lot of bodybuilders have had to experience that. I think his strength right now is his calves and his hamstrings, that separation between the leg on the side, but then you turn around and you lose the hamstring. So from the side, it looks a little bit more representative. The back, again, this is a contest where the glutes are shredded and you look there, but when he opens up the back, the detail kind of is not there. That's where he's got to work on. That's been his Achilles heel. He picks the right contest, he can win. This is a contest that definitely he's showing the world that he's one of the best in the world, but what he's got to do to really stand out is he's got to add more sweeps to the quadricep, more meat on the bone in the back area, and I think he's doing very well for what he has to work with.
Michael Lockett gives you a real sense for just how far this whole thing has come. When you start talking about picking apart a physique like this, which is extremely good, and this is a guy who walks out there, and we can pick him apart. And it's amazing because that's how far some of these top-tier guys have become, where a guy like Michael Lockett walks out there, and it's just hard for him to compare at that level.
Absolutely.
Jackson.
All right, well, you are looking at the most decorated bodybuilder in the history of the sport. He has 28 pro wins to his credit, making him the winningest professional bodybuilder of all time. He turns 48 in November. Now, we just talked about Victor Martinez being 10 years removed from nearly winning an Olympia title. Dexter Jackson, incredibly enough, is 9 years removed from being Mr. Olympia, and he is here right now on this stage, not just as a participant, but as a bona fide, legitimate contender for this title here 9 years after he won this thing in 08.
I believe he'll be 48 years old in November. I mean, it's just a number as far as he's concerned. He's a top 6 competitor no matter what happens on this stage. He just has the genetics, and you just have it or you don't. I don't see the drop-off. Usually when you get older, you start seeing guys dropping off. Dexter seems to be holding on to that mass, and most of the people, when you get older, you start to lose it in the legs, and the legs are still there for Dexter. They haven't failed him.
He's got that signature, dense, grainy muscle that has become his calling card. It's what sort of has helped earn him the title, the Blade, for his uncanny ability to come in shape almost every time he walks on stage. All the talk this year, and Dexter was very open about it, was his added size. He was very quick to boast about the added muscle. He had reported getting up to as heavy as, 260 pounds at points throughout this year. Yeah. And the question is, are you seeing that added size translate here tonight?
I'm definitely not seeing a diminished size factor. I'm not sure if he looks that much wow factor big, but he looks like Dexter is a study of consistency. He doesn't change a lot from year to year. I think you hit the point where you know what to expect from Dexter. The calves are never going to be what they should be, but he still finds a way to highlight the traps, highlight the delts, highlight the pecs and the shoulders. He does the best with what he has to work with, better than anybody else, which is why he's still here.
Mad Max Charles.
All right, well, 4 years ago, Max Charles won himself a USA title, of course, the same title held by our reigning champion, Phil Heath. He has now competing for the 4th time this year, so Max Charles has kept busy. One of those events was in Columbus at the Arnold Classic, where he scored a top 3 finish, sort of putting himself on the bodybuilding map.
Yeah, he was actually leading Dallas McCarver right behind Brandon Curry in the Australia show before Dallas had some complications. Max looks tired here. I saw him earlier in the year in the spring. The stomach is just not there. The detail's not there. The quads don't have the separation. He wanted to be in this contest, and sometimes you do it because you love it, but at the same time, it doesn't translate physically. And right now, what we're seeing is a physique that's a little bit tired. I'm sure Max is looking forward to a nice long off season. He said his preparation started in December, so he's literally been on one since December, and here we are towards the tail end of September.
All right, you're watching Amazon Sports Nutrition's presentation of Joe Weider's Olympia Fitness and Performance Weekend. We are going through our first look at our 18 Mr. Olympia competitors. Dan Solomon along with Shawn Ray. And in just a moment, we're going to get a look at your 6-time defending reigning champion, Phil Heath. And of course, all eyes are on Phil as he looks to equal the mark of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger and pick up a 7th Sandow Trophy. Based on the way a few of these guys have come in so far, it's not going to be an easy title for him, But if Phil is able to bring to the stage what we know he can, it almost becomes a foregone conclusion. Having said that, the opportunity to see Dexter Jackson and Shawn Rhoden flanked on either side of Phil is sort of what we're all waiting for. And I got to be honest with you, I think this contest goes beyond those three.
It does. The X Factor is going to be Big Rami, and of course the Pocket Rocket, William Bonac. One of the guys won't be there, will be Max Charles. Again, he just doesn't have the detail to be competitive, and we've seen him much harder, much more separated, especially in the spring. So Max is going to be along for the ride here tonight. But yeah, all eyes are on Mr. Consistency, and that would be Phil.
And your final competitor. From the USA is your 6-time reigning and defending Olympia champion, the Gift, Phil Heath.
Shawn, 11 years ago at your event in Colorado at the Shawn Ray Classic, a young man named Phil Heath, who was competing in his hometown that night, made his professional debut. He wowed the crowd. It was a victorious debut. He won a week later in New York, and so began one of the most illustrious careers this sport has ever known. He has since gone on to win the Olympia 6 times, and tonight he's gunning for number 7. He and his trainer, Hani Rambod, have put in the work. They devised a plan, so I'm going to let you, Shawn Ray, be the first here in 2017 to assess this version of Phil Heath.
It was a long time ago, Dan. Phil has done many things in those 11 years with what he has to work with, and mind you, he didn't wake up and become Mr. Olympia overnight. He put in the work. He won that junior national title. Wound up coming up winning the USA's right here in Las Vegas, and he's plotted his way. I believe he started off in the Mr. Olympia not as Mr. Olympia. He was 4th place, worked his way up to first runner-up behind Jay Cutler, and ultimately grabbed the title, and here he is. And so far, I got no complaints. And again, from the back, this is where these shows are won and lost. Those hamstrings, that back, I haven't seen anybody matching him in this.
Yeah, it really is a winning formula. It's just a level of dimension that most guys just really in the history of the sport haven't been able to bring to the stage. It is eye-popping, jaw-dropping muscle as Phil Heath gets the crowd behind him, and it's really fun watching Phil sort of evolve as a professional. The way he takes the stage, the way he commands the stage, he hits his shots. He knows what he's here to do. This is very much a workman-like business trip for Phil Heath, and he's here to continue his reign atop the sport. But make no mistake about it, each year it's a different look for Phil.
Olympia champion, Phil Heath.
I appreciate it.
All right, we're back and we're continuing our prejudging round here at the Mr. Olympia. It is a night of champions so far. We have crowned 3. Breon Angeli, the Classic Physique champion. Oksana Grishina takes the Fitness Olympia title. And Sydney Gillen is your champion of the 2017 Figure Olympia. And we are going to soon learn how this Mr. Olympia is going to play out. But of course, we will not know that outcome until tomorrow night's finals. But first things first, we have to put these guys through the rigors of comparison. And you can be sure Steve Weinberger is going to make these gentlemen work.
And I mean, Steve can look at these guys pretty much like I can, Dan, and know who's going to wind up where in terms of these call-outs. The fans are definitely interested in seeing their fan favorite standing next to the better guys. Right now, I think Phil's still in the lead. I mean, I just didn't see anybody stand up to him from the back. I want to see what they look like next to him in the front. Phil looked a little bit heavy in the midsection. He's got to be careful in between poses. You let that stomach out, and everybody's going to be looking at it. And him being a champion, he needs to be acutely aware that that midsection has got to be tucked away, along with Shawn Rhoden, when the time comes, especially in the transitional poses. Now you're going to be standing next to guys that potentially can either out-muscle you or be in better condition than you. And if you want to stand out, you've got to make sure that you look at your best when you're in those comparison rounds.
Now, Shawn, just to be clear, what we're looking at here, this is not a call-out. These are the numerical comparison portion of the judging, where they bring them out. You're looking at competitor 7 through 12, and they are being put through 7 through 11, and they bring them out that way. So this is not to be read into at this point.
No, what this does is give the judges one quick look at what they think they're going to want to see compared next to each other. And this is a very important round, although a lot of people think it's meaningless. The judges have to see you in these quarter turns when you're not, you know, flexing on a double bicep.
And by the way, you guys just saw at the lower portion of the screen the various commentators. We are actually presenting this event worldwide in multiple languages. So we are extremely proud of the global participation by all of our various partners, and really all continents are able to experience this event live as we watch it here play out in Las Vegas. This sport has become just an international phenomenon, and the fact that our friends at Amazon.com have sort of helped us bring this thing to the world is an incredible thing, and I know the fans around the world appreciate it.
Absolutely, Dan. Supply and demand. This is happening in every little nook and corner of the world. I had the chance to go to China this past February, and it was amazing, the reception for the knowledge, just for the education. They are tuned in. They're all paying attention to their health. They're paying attention to supplements as well as competition. So the world is a fit place, and Joe Weider predicted that back when he started this thing on this global expansion with his brother Ben. And Amazon.com is definitely paying it forward by sharing this with the rest of the world.
All right, folks, moving into our comparisons. We're going to have all 18 Olympians on stage.
This is where the rubber hits the road, Dan. The first all-important first call out. It usually sets the tone for who's who and what's what in terms of final placements. Everybody on that stage wants to be in that very first call out. Naturally, if Phil Heath's name is called out, you want to be standing next to Phil Heath.
Funny, I interviewed Steve Weinberger a short while ago over at digitalmuscle.com, and when I did that, I asked him about that responsibility, that pressure of being the voice that gives the most coveted coveted call out of the year, that coveted Olympia first call out. The bodybuilders train all year trying to be in that first group. Right now, Steve Weinberger is gathering the opinions of his panel, but it's his voice that's going to tell these gentlemen who that first group he wants to look at, and you're going to hear it right now.
Dexter and Phil.
It's a lot of guys to be calling out in the first call out. I remember, Dan, when they called out 3 guys.
Well, you're not looking at any surprises here. I think this is kind of the group that we were looking for. Brandon Curry did make his way into this first call out, and I know that's something that he obviously wanted to achieve. But with Shawn Rhoden and last year's top 5 finisher, William Bonac, and of course Phil, this is, and Big Ramy, this is a group that we sort of anticipated seeing. And Dexter Jackson, once again, assumes his spot and an Olympia first call out.
And right away, they're moving Big Ramy in close next to Phil Heath, and Phil's like, bring it on. Phil's not shy with 6 Olympia titles at home on his mantle. And of course, these guys are all nipping at his heels. But Big Ramy is serving notice with the shoulders and the thighs.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to compare Phil Heath to Mamdouh Elssbiay Big Ramy right now, because this is a key comparison.
That's a very close comparison. Apples and oranges still, because Phil's a little bit more genetically advantaged there. He's put together a little bit more pleasing, but you can't ignore those arms on Big Ramy or those thighs.
A little more dimension and depth to the upper half of Phil Heath's physique. Obviously, Ramy has the overpowering thighs. Of course, Phil Heath's thighs aren't too shabby either. So you're talking about 2 of the very best in the planet. It's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out as we move forward, and not to be forgotten all of this, you know, Dexter Jackson and Shawn Rhoden and William Bonac, and now, of course, Brandon Curry arrives in this group.
They'll be moved around and shuffled quite a bit, but right now, Dan, I'm going with Big Ramy and Phil Heath as the leaders of this lineup. Big Ramy's too big to ignore, and Phil is the reigning and defending champion. I think Phil is appearing a little bit bloated, and that's going to work against him if he doesn't dry that up by tomorrow, but that's the thing, Dan. They will have time to improve on what we see as shortcomings here tonight.
And Phil has a history of making key adjustments in those 24 hours.
Makes the difference in winning and losing. I've saw him losing and yet win because he made such a transformation in 24 hours.
Well, I think so far what we know is Big Ramy is climbing the ladder. He's moving up.
He's serving notice, but I got to tell you, I think Phil is still holding steadfast on that #1 placement. I'm going to be curious to see what's going to happen after Phil and Ramy, because right now I got Phil and Ramy. So if that's my 1 and 2, I got to look at 3 and 4.
And let's look at Ramy and Dexter, because Dexter outconditions Big Ramy all day.
He does.
And you know, so it's funny because we're always, you know, we're quick right now. We're jumping right on the Ramy train. But right next to Big Ramy, to his left, is Dexter Jackson, which brings a completely different look. So I think we owe it to the process to compare these guys appropriately.
Absolutely.
William
And when they start to
switch.
change them around, we'll start changing our appearances
That's right.
accordingly, because that's what the call-out's for. So now William Bonac's going to get the opportunity to stand to the left of the champion. I don't know that William Bonac has the size just yet to stand next to Phil or Big Rami. But Rami does look a little bit flat. He could have a little bit more oil on his body to shine just a little bit more. All these guys are going to look considerably better by tomorrow after they get done posing. But Phil, you see the water coming out on Phil's chest. As he starts to shine, we're seeing the sweat come out. That's the water that you can hold subcutaneously under your skin. Brandon, he's not sweating. Big Rami is not sweating. That's because they've dried out as much as they can. Phil looks like a little bit raw retentive, especially in the midsection. It's coming out on the chest,
Dexter,
shoulders, and
William,
arms.
Phil, and Rami back in line, please. Roelly, Nathan, Josh, and Cedric, come join us.
Dexter, William Bonac, Phil Heath, and Big Rami were sent back in line, which gives us our first sort of tip of the hand as to what head judge Steve Weinberger is thinking.
It's not just him, it's the collectively, and
Sure.
I think that's appropriate. I was looking at the exact same thing. I mean, William Bonac moved up as far as I'm concerned. He was 5th a year ago. They took the top 4 and set them aside. Now, this is where the contest is, because I think that top 4 actually set themselves apart, and Shawn Rhoden is not a happy camper right here, but it's a warranted situation. Shawn didn't have what he had a year ago. Last year's first runner-up, you can still see he relaxes and the stomach is still, there's a little bit of distension there. And the detail in the quads, he looks to be a heavier bodybuilder than last year, and that doesn't work with a physique like Rhoden. And when you see the double bicep, it's just not, something's off in that. A year ago, he was on, it's not there. And of course, Brandon Curry has got to be one of the happier bodybuilders, even though he's in call-out number 2. This is a guy, this is his 3rd contest this year. So if anybody's happy up there right now, it's Brandon Curry. If anybody's pissed off, it'd be Shawn Rhoden. I know Nathan Diash is happy. And Cedric McMillan, I've never seen him not be a happy bodybuilder regardless of the placement.
He's always happy no matter what he's doing, but unfortunately, he is not going to do what we've been waiting for him to do on an Olympia stage. It doesn't look like that's going to happen tonight.
And you can see that in the face. I saw it yesterday. The face just didn't look like he suffered, like, you know. And some bodybuilders aren't willing to suffer because they're not going to, you know, give everything they have to this sport. They're going to do the best with what they have. Cedric's probably been very busy after winning the Arnold Classic. I got to tell you, Dan, 91 I won the Arnold Classic and I went on tour. By the time I got to the Mr. Olympia, I went through the motions. There's a lot that goes with winning that Arnold Classic in March that you kind of run out of gas by September. The other bodybuilders didn't have that same disposition, especially Phil. He was well rested. Cedric McMillan right now, his shape is keeping him in this game.
And of course, the new trend with technology is these guys will watch themselves on the big monitor as they're hitting these shots. So they are watching this event right along with the rest of you guys here on the big screens here at the Orleans Arena. But I got to tell you, this is where it gets, like you mentioned, Shawn Ray, this gets really difficult right now for the judging panel because there's not a lot separating these guys, and it's all about getting into that top 6. That's that elite fraternity over the course of years, that top 6 at the Olympia.
Yes.
And right now, it's very much up for grabs.
And there's 2 guys from this call-out that are going to try to move into that top 6. Roelly Winklaar looks like he's holding his own, but again, he gets better as he poses. That water's coming out, he gets better. Sometimes he forgets the stomach. Brandon Curry's a guy that can wind up cracking that top 6. And Shawn, right now, I just don't see him coming up.
Well, it looks like they're going to move Shawn into, they're going to swap Nathan and Shawn Rhoden. And Shawn Rhoden's just trying to fight his way back.
Yes.
And, I would say don't give up on Shawn Rhoden yet because he can fight his way into this top group. He is a notorious top 5 finisher here at the Olympia for the last several years.
And that Nathan Diash got called up into the center. He's a good little bodybuilder from the UK. Again, the lower back needs some work on it, but he's a very complete little bodybuilder.
And he is, Steve is putting them to work. He's kind of creating every type of comparison. I know these guys, when it's all said and done, the only complaint we hear is they always say, why didn't you let me stand next to that guy? And I know Steve's doing everything he can right now to make sure that nobody asks that question. And right now these guys are going to hit a most muscular, and we're going to see if we can find some point of difference to separate these guys.
Well, it's a pretty big
Gentlemen, hit a front double bicep.
deal when you were 2nd in the world a year ago and you're battling to stay in the top 6, Dan. And that's a strong reality for Shawn Rhoden. He's wrestling with that mentally right now because he has no idea what the judges are going to do with him as he's being moved around in this lineup.
So every year we look at an Olympia lineup and we'll say who nailed it. And based on what we're seeing so far, if anybody were to ask me who nailed it, I don't know if I have an answer for him.
I don't either. I mean, there's a little bit of criticism for all the guys. Again, Phil looked a little bit bloated in the stomach, and he didn't hold it in the transitions. Big Ramy looked a little bit flat, could have had a little bit darker color, could have had a little more shine on his physique. William Bonac looked a little bit tighter than he did last year in certain poses, but not a lot of improvement. I know he's 5 pounds heavier, but not a lot of improvement on William Bonac. I think by default, he's moving up, and Rhoden is the one that's paying the price.
And if you're just joining us here at the Orleans Arena for our coverage of Olympia weekend, that all-important first call-out, the way it played out is Phil Heath, Big Ramy, William Bonac, and Dexter Jackson were sent back in line, which kind of gave us a sense that they are being looked at as the top 4, at least early on in the competition. So if you were kind of waiting to see how this might play out, Phil Heath, Big Ramy, William Bonac, Dexter Jackson seem to have the early look for those top 4. But my guess is Steve is going to continue to make these guys work as he goes a little bit further down the lineup into some of the lower call-outs.
And again, Dan, I mean, these guys all won a pro event to be here, with the exception, I believe, on points, Max Charles. And, of course, some of these athletes might have wanted not to come into this contest. We know mentally Josh Lenarkowitz is probably burnt. On one occasion, he qualifies by winning the Tampa Pro, and he's excited about doing Olympia. The next thing you know, he's at a funeral. Max Charles traveled the globe in order to gather up enough points to be here, along with Jeff Beckham. And, of course, Johnny Jackson comes basically out of retirement to qualify for this contest. He's in the last call-out, but this is a veteran. He's been here 13 years. Where else does he want to be?
You know, this might be one of the more impressive last call-outs. We'll see. I mean, there's some really good bodybuilders in this group. So it's great to see just the quality in this Olympia lineup, because when these guys were out there by themselves, these guys look pretty good.
Yes, they did.
And here we are looking at them in what appears to be a last call-out situation. But you just can't say enough as we sort of process what's played out so far, that Dexter Jackson, at almost 48 years old, is back in what appears to be the Olympia top 4 again.
Right, and a couple of his colleagues. You got Victor Martinez. We may be seeing the last of Victor Martinez here at the Olympia, along with Johnny Jackson, both 40-plus-year-old bodybuilders who I don't know how much gas in the tank they have, because they're usually typically up there in the top. I mean, Victor's used to being up in the top, and this is not something that's a pleasant experience for Victor Martinez. Even though he's on that Olympia stage, it's not where he's customarily used to being.
Front lat spread.
And as a programming note, when this portion of the judging completes, we will move in to the under 212-pound division, where the now legendary James Flex Lewis will take a shot at another title in that division, a division he has dominated for several years. And we'll get to that in just a moment. So we still have a lot of ground to cover as our coverage here on Amazon.com continues. And these Olympia weekends, Shawn, they are just endless storylines.
Absolutely. I saw 1983 Mr. Olympia, the Lion of Lebanon, in the house. Of course, 6-time Mr. Olympia Dorian Yates is bebopping around out there. You never know who you're going to walk into at these Mr. Olympia expos, and then you wind up here at the event. I heard that The Rock is going to be somewhere around, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, these are what gets people in the gym and come to Las Vegas to see these types of athletes. Very decorated, very accomplished, game changers, I'd call them, that paved the way for the guys that we're looking at tonight.
And you did mention Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's name. He will be in attendance for tomorrow night's event, so we're excited to welcome Dwayne back to Olympia weekend, where he has suddenly become a big part of the Olympia family, and we're very excited to welcome he and folks at 7 Bucks Productions to Las Vegas to be a big centerpiece here and be a part of the crowning of a new champion. So this sport has been become all about the stars. Arnold, I'm told, will be there, as you mentioned.
Dexter,
Betty Weeder,
Shawn,
I'm told, will be in town tomorrow as well.
And Roelly.
And so now we come back, Dan, where the judges take another final look. And this is one of those things where it can really throw a monkey wrench in what we were thinking about, because now you got Dexter in the same call out as Shawn Rhoden. And of course, we talked about how improved Nathan Asha was, and I mentioned how Roelly Winklaar gets better as he poses, but Brandon Curry he's right there. This is something that he dreamed of. Brandon Curry standing next to Dexter Jackson on the Mr. Olympia stage. I mean, these are two Arnold Classic decorated winners from yesterday's past.
The two storylines in this call-out is they're going to make Dexter Jackson fight a little bit more for that spot, and they're also going to give Shawn Rhoden an opportunity to take that spot from the blade.
That's what you got to love about the IFBB and Steve Weinberger, making sure everyone's getting that look, getting that comparison. 1 minute, Shawn Rhoden's dejected and Dexter Jackson elated, and now they're standing in the same comparison going, what the hell's going on here?
And they had to do this. They couldn't let this thing play out without Shawn and Dexter standing next to each other, because those guys have gone toe-to-toe now for a few years. A rivalry has played out with these two guys kind of going back and forth. And, of course, Shawn Rhoden got the best of Dexter a year ago, and you can be sure that among Dexter's objectives is to settle that score this year with Shawn Rhoden.
Absolutely. And, again, every bodybuilder that's here feels like they have an equal opportunity to win. Shawn Rhoden was very vocal about coming here to take the title from Phil Heath, and Phil Heath very vocal about not letting anyone take the title. And of course, Dexter Jackson's got the 2008 Sandow Trophy comfortably home on his mantle and would like nothing more than to walk off with the 400,000 plus tomorrow night here at the 53rd Mr. Olympia Championships.
So the other takeaway now from this call out is that clearly Big Ramy is in the top 3, but even still, more than that, William Bonac appears to be in the top 3, which is a really big story.
Well, Neil Hill, his trainer, we talked yesterday, and he said, look, take it to the house. William's better than he was a year ago, and right now, it sounds like he may be serving notice. 5'6", 229 pounds from the Netherlands. William Bonac is legit. But this is an interesting comparison, Dan, because we can flip some coins here, and things can change on a dime with respect to the different types of physiques that we're looking at. We're looking at an off Shawn Rhoden. We're looking at an older Dexter Jackson, a young, fresh up-and-comer in Nathan D'Asha, and, of course, Brandon Curry getting a second re-energized look by way of the Oxygen Gym and the Camel Crew. If those guys weren't there, Brandon Curry's not here.
You know, when you look at these guys, this particular call-up, it's really hard for a guy like Roelly Winklaar to fit into this group. He becomes the odd man out in a lineup like this.
Yeah, because he's got so much muscle. He's kind of boxy. He's got the big arms. He doesn't have the pretty aesthetics. He's going to be standing between Dexter and Shawn, two genetic freaks. In the relaxed pose, you're going to see as they start to open up, Roelly will start to lose ground between these two genetic freaks. But Shawn Rhoden is just a little bit too comfortable in between rounds, relaxing his stomach. I'd like to see him keep that stomach tight like it is right now, but he has a tendency to take long, deep breaths, which tells me he's not in the kind of condition he's typically used to being in. That's Roelly's pose right there. I think it's very hard. Dexter Jackson can stand in it, but Roelly, after that, Roelly kind of starts to fade in comparison poses.
But that most muscular from Roelly Winklaar is damn impressive.
It's world class.
Spread out, guys.
As if the stage isn't big enough, huh, Dan? Hitting elbows.
Take a step.
It's compared. There's a lot at stake. This has a tendency to set the tone for the kind of money these guys can make in terms of their guest appearances, in terms of their social media. I mean, 1st through 10th is very important to these bodybuilders. None of them want to lose, but it means something to play 7th, 6th, 5th place in the Mr. Olympia, especially when you're representing other countries.
Well, one of the reasons why that 5th place spot is such a coveted spot is because that means you don't have to compete all year. Top 5 at this event qualifies for next year. So they're going to bring out, as we mentioned earlier, Phil Heath, Mamdouh, Elssbiay, Big Ramy, and William Bonac for a top 3 comparison. And it would be reasonable to guess this will probably be our final comparison of this round.
It will be, and I doubt that tomorrow anybody's going to make the necessary changes to change what we're looking at right now.
Well, what we're looking at is 2 bodybuilders who have moved up. William Bonac, Big Ramy, neither of them have ever tasted the top 3 in the world, and it looks like that's in the future for them in the next 24 hours. Phil Heath is trying to fend off both of them and retain the most coveted title in bodybuilding, and he's going to work for it. Because you can be sure that as Phil Heath directs traffic up there, you can be sure that Phil Heath's going to have to work for it. But really, as you look at these guys, it's hard to imagine, as great as Ramy is, as wide as he is, as thickly built as he is, with all that dense, grainy muscle and the clear improvements in the world-class conditioning that he has finally brought to the Olympia stage, people always used to say, if Rami gets it together and comes in shape, is it going to be good enough to knock off Phil Heath? So I think that question, I'll pose it to you. Is it good enough to take out Phil?
I think it's damn close. I would not be surprised, Dan, if we don't see exactly what you're talking about. It's very possible. I'm not going to say probable, but it's very possible. Steve Weinberger is a very fair head judge, and I saw Rami over in Kuwait beat Dexter and Shawn Rhoden.
And I'll tell you what, Phil Heath might be laughing right now. But Steve Weinberger just put the defending champion on the outside and moved Big Rami into the center spot. You can read into that. We don't want to overstate it. But at the end of the day, right now, Big Rami is getting his chance to stand in the center of what appears to be the final call-out of the day. At the very least, we have some intrigue.
Well, I'm not going to end it there. William Bonac might wind up in the middle, too, and give them all a fair shot. But Big Rami, he's serving notice, man, and I'm not going to say that it's impossible. Phil's genetics are far more superior than Rami's, but there's individual poses where Rami is undeniably all up in his grill, and we cannot discount what little William Bonac is bringing, because William is as complete as they come. He's just smaller. I faced the same situation. Labrada, same situation. Mohamed Makaway. Sometimes when you're small, you're the odd man out. And right now, these two big men in Phil Heath and Big Rami, this is a contest that's up for grabs as of tonight.
And it's a bit of an apples and oranges situation, and we're kind of back to that. We had kind of moved away from the apples oranges debate when Ronnie's reign ended, when Jay's reign ended, but we're kind of back there now. Big Rami's the big, thick, massive bodybuilder. And they're going to do exactly what you said. They're going to put William in the middle, which probably relieves Phil just a little bit right
look
now.
He's smiling. He's like, thank you.
Because the narrative has just shifted in that moment where now he's no longer concerned. But you know what? He should be concerned.
He should be concerned. Big Rami's been coming for a long time. I got to imagine Jay Cutler, when he saw Phil Heath coming. I can imagine Ronnie Coleman when he saw Jay Cutler coming. Eventually, it happens and every dog has their day. But as I look at Phil Heath, as good as his physique is with those big overblown deltoids, his chest is a little bit diminished as a result of the shoulders. My eyes keep coming back to Rami in terms of being the guy that's going to be able to stand with Phil and battle with Phil. And we're not even talking about Rami's calves, because they're not even really a factor here. His size, his shoulder width, the girth, it's something that you can't ignore on those thigh sweeps.
Well, the other thing you can't ignore is the fact that here in 2017 at the Olympia, we have ourselves a legitimate battle. We're not going to come away from this prejudging with a clear sense of who won the contest. Big Rami has done the work. William Bonac is impressive. And Phil Heath is good, but he may have cracked open that door just enough to keep things interesting.
He left the door open. Tomorrow we're going to find out.
We're going to find out, but first,